All right, gang, let's get started. That was a great piece, Russ. Thank you so much for doing that. So, almost 12 years ago, I found myself on an unexpected journey. Um, have you ever found yourself in that situation where something happened, something pretty significant, and it caused the course of your life to go a completely different direction, a direction you didn't anticipate? I remember, for example, back in 1992, when I went to law school, I was there for a year. And at the end of that year, they sent me a letter. And the letter that they sent me read something to this effect: if you intend to stay in law school, you should probably average something greater than a D. It was their friendly way of inviting me out of law school. They were basically saying, you can't stay because your grades aren't good enough. And I found myself in 2009 in the same situation. An event occurred that I didn't anticipate, and I really didn't have a plan B. I'd lost everything, like a lot of people did back in 2007, 8, and 9, with the economy, collapsing, with the mortgage market collapsing, and real estate collapsing. And George came to me, who at that point had been a longtime friend, 16 years at that point, and he proposed something, knowing full well that we both had our financial hat handed to us. And he said, what do you think about starting a real estate brokerage? And I said, if anybody asked me that question, besides you, I'd say they're crazy. And I said, but let's do it. And so we did. And what I found, guys and gals, is about 6 months into this journey that is now Everest, some almost 12 years later, I was just not prepared. As much as I thought I was prepared and knew what I was doing, I was not prepared. And again, I ask you this question: have you ever found yourself in a situation where some unexpected event occurred and it changed the course of your life, the direction of your life forever, and you didn't ask for it, you didn't want it, and it was not easy? Well, that was me in 2009 when George and I started the company. As much as I thought I was prepared, I found out very quickly that I was not. And I had a choice. I remember a very pivotal conversation with George and Rob Oakey as we sat in a conference room, and George had been gone for about 6 weeks because of heart surgery, and Rob and I were left to lead the company, which was just one office at the time, probably about we were probably about 30 agents at the time, not very big. And it was my job to lead morning Ascent and to, coach agents and group coaching and so forth. And it didn't go well. And George came back after, his hiatus and recovering from heart surgery, and asked how it went. And I admitted it didn't go very well. And he said, you're right, it didn't. I've heard from agents saying that it was pretty painful in, sitting and listening to me talk in front of a group or try to lead group coaching. Because again, guys and gals, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. I thought I did. I've been in the business for 16 years, that running a brokerage is no different than, being a real estate agent. And I found that very quickly to not be the case. And I remember saying to George in that conversation, John says we were about 60 at that point. Well, we may have been, John. I think that at the end of our first year, we were 52 agents, and we weren't a year into it at that point. But in any case, that doesn't matter. The point is, I remember in the conversation with George saying to him that that if I ever found out that he was withholding any sort of constructive criticism or observations, that I'm not doing my job and could be doing it better, that I would get very angry. I would be very disappointed. It was my expectation that he would confront me. And of course, he agreed to. I mean, if you know George, he's not afraid, as a general statement, to confront. But my concern was that, being his best friend, that he may be afraid to have those conversations. Well, the good news is that he is he's been willing to do that. But my point is this, and this is the conversation I want to have with you. When I found myself in that situation, going a completely new direction, because guys and gals, I mean, to be honest, I was worth several $1 million coming up to 2009, and I lost it all. And there I was in a position where I had been asked to start a company, thought I knew what I was doing, found out very quickly I had no idea. And I had to look for answers. I had to figure it out as quickly as possible. And I went on this personal journey of personal development. And there are 7 people that I turned to, that I discovered, really, quite frankly, because most of them I was not aware of them 12 years ago, quite frankly. I didn't know who they were. I was introduced to one of them by George, and then the rest I just discovered through research, with the exception of one of them, and we'll talk about that. But there are 7 people that I want to just share with you this morning, and primarily their message, because I believe that if their message, their approach, their wisdom helped me through what I consider the most trying time of my life, really, quite frankly, that last 12 years, and especially those first few years of the Everest experience for me, that I want to share with you that information, with you, what I have learned from them. So the first person that I want to share with you is Jim Rohn. Now, most of you probably know who Jim Rohn is, but I discovered Jim Rohn with George in Moab, Utah, as we were four-wheeling through that beautiful country there. And he played a CD of one of Jim Rohn's messages. Bottom line is this, that what I have learned from Jim Rohn, if you've never listened to Jim, if you distill his message down, it is basically this. This rings it's so clearly in my mind. Jim saying this, I can see him saying it over and over again. Don't wish things were easier, wish you were better. And I think there's such a powerful message in that. As I found myself almost 12 years ago in a situation where things were very difficult, I found myself saying, I wish things were easier. Why does it have to be this difficult? In fact, guys and gals, I literally considered quitting because I didn't like how difficult things were. And I was looking for a solution. And one of the most obvious solutions was to just simply stop doing it. Go back to selling real estate, because you know that. You can do that. Even if things are difficult right now, you'll figure that out. And just simply get away from all of this pain, this psychological dissonance, this agony, this fear that you face every day coming to work, having to lead people and feeling like, you're incompetent. And when I heard Jim Rohn say that, don't wish things were easier, wish you were better, it was this aha for me. It was like I could focus on how difficult things are, like most people do, or I could shift my focus. It was revolutionary to how I could improve myself so that as I'm asked to do the difficult things, that I can do the difficult things. So that ultimately, and this was the linchpin, that I wouldn't be a quitter. Because had I quit at that point, decided to go back to selling real estate, let's be honest, I would have been a quitter. Because things were difficult, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I felt afraid. I felt very self-conscious. I felt that it was very obvious that I didn't know what I was doing. And I had a choice. I could choose to simply quit and move forward with what I already knew and kind of ride off into that sunset. And I'm so grateful for Jim Rohn and his message of don't wish that it were easier, wish you were better. In other words, really be resourceful. Figure it out. See, I think ultimately Jim's message is about focus. What are you going to focus on? So the reason I share this with you is because for a lot of you, the fact is that everybody is either headed into the most difficult time of their life, they're presently in it, or they're just coming out of it in most cases. And this year is, I think, no exception to that. I mean, I think this year has been one of the most difficult for a lot of people. And so I ask you this question: if things are difficult for you right now, and they have been, what is your focus? Are you wishing things were easier? Or are you looking to become better? Are you looking to be resourceful, to improve yourself in order to improve your circumstances? See, all that is a focus issue. It's just simply focusing, shifting focus from what the challenges are, what all the problems are, and in most cases, the things that we don't control, and shifting our focus to the things that we have control over, specifically ourselves. As Jim said, wish you were better. In other words, his message was shift your focus from how difficult things are and all the problems to what it is that you can do proactively, presently, right now, to begin to improve your circumstances. If you've never read his book, 12 Pillars, it's a great book. I would highly recommend it. It's an easy read. Most of you could probably read it in a day or two. It took me, I think, 3 days, but it's a very small book, but it's a great book that speaks to the principles of Jim Rohn. I wanted to share that one with you because for me, Jim, I have a very personal relationship with Jim. Even though I've never met him, I feel like I have. I feel like, he's like a grandfather figure for me. I leaned on him so much in those early years, and that his message of simply shifting your focus on becoming better, quite frankly, saved me. It allowed me to be here today with you and sharing this message. So Jim Rohn, don't wish things were easier, wish you were better. Get his book, 12 Pillars, and read it. The second person that has been such a one of the most critical people for me in my personal journey over the last 12 years is John C. Maxwell. Now, many of you may know John C. Maxwell. He's actually a preacher. He's a theologian, a man of the cloth, but he's more than that. I believe that John C. Maxwell is the foremost expert on leadership in the world today. And the thing that John taught me that I realized many years ago as I was working as a broker and owner and as a real estate agent in Everest Realty Group was this. John awakened me to this idea that I'm not a real estate agent and that I'm really not even a broker or an owner of a company. What I am as a leader. He changed my vocabulary for me to recognize that I am a leader. And that as such, a leader's number one skill is their ability to communicate, to relate to other human beings, to build rapport, basically, and to offer value. And that value, as he explains it, is to take people to the next level. Now, look, guys and gals, you're no different in your role as agents and working with the public. You are a leader. And your job is to help people get to the next level in their life, to sell their home, to move forward on whatever their goal is relative to getting their home sold and starting the next chapter in their life. And, John's message of basically, I am a leader, revolutionized my approach and my focus every single day as I work towards my personal journey of personal development. It helped clarify things for me to recognize that, okay, yes, I am a leader. And if I'm a leader, what do leaders do? How do leaders behave? What are the things that leaders do on a daily basis to get better at leading other people? And then that broke open in the opportunity to read others and to look at, methods of improving my presentation skills, which are so critical in the business of real estate. When I say presentation skills, I'm not talking about presenting to people to motivate them and inspire them, getting in front of a crowd of 500 people. Although the skill to do that is the same skill as you sit down with your buyers and sellers at a kitchen table or conference room table. But guys and gals, the reason I share this with you is I want you to recognize that is what you are, is you are a leader. And if that is what you are, figure out what it takes to be a better leader, not a better real estate agent, not a better realtor. There are enough people out there. There are over 1.5 million agents out there who are really focused on that. And I'm telling you, their eyes are on the wrong ball. We need to be focused on being better leaders. And there's no better source to do that and to figure that out than, I believe, John C. Maxwell. A couple of his books that I would recommend: The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and then The 5 Levels of Leadership. And then I'm seeing in the chat line, there's some other recommendations as well. John has written, I think, about 60 books. I don't care which book of his that you read, you will not go wrong. They are exceptional books. If you want to, even just today, I would recommend get on YouTube and look up John C. Maxwell, 5 Levels of Leadership. There is a video, it's about 27 minutes long, and he goes through the basic concept of the 5 levels of leadership. I promise you, it will be well worth your time. And it's great to get refocused on this, especially right now, as you work towards setting your goals and looking to the future, 2021, on how you're going to produce more in the new year. And the bottom line is it's going to start with you and how good of a leader you are. The third person that I want to share with you is Brian Tracy. The primary message that at least I got from Brian Tracy was to prioritize. Brian taught me this concept that there's no such thing as time management. It's not about time management. We watch people who are so successful, and we watch how much they accomplish on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, and in short periods of time, how they revolutionize not only their own world, but they can revolutionize the world. You know, you take a look at somebody like a Jeff Bezos and what he's done in the short period of time that he's owned Amazon and how it's transformed the world. Well, look, in order for us to be highly efficient and to achieve what the ordinary person never will, we have to recognize this, that every person gets 87,000 seconds every single day, guys and gals. You don't get any more or any less than the next person. And yet what we know is that there are people out there who accomplish a lot less than you, and there are people out there who accomplish way more than you do with the same amount of time. And so, you know, we have to ask ourselves the question, how is that possible? Well, it comes down to basically Brian's message that it's not about time management because we all have the same amount of time. It's about event management. It's about prioritization. And I've read several of his books, but I think probably the most impactful book of his that I have read is Eat That Frog. And it just simply talks about this concept that most people, if you take a look at it, if you were to assign in terms of an analogy or a metaphor, tadpoles, meaning those are the simple tasks that we have to do on a daily basis, the tasks that we're most likely to do or want to do, given the options. Then there are the frogs. The frogs are those things that we know that we need to do, and we'll get to them probably, but they're not our favorite things. And then there are the toads. Those are the things we absolutely hate to do. We're afraid to do them, and we rarely get to them because we just don't like to do it. In most cases, it invokes fear. And I want you to think about that as an agent. What are those three things? You know, what are the tadpoles? What are the frogs? What are the toads? Well, it's obvious, you know, that in the business of real estate, the toad is prospecting. It's knocking on doors and it's calling people. It's talking to people and facing the possibility or the reality that you're going to get rejected. And most real estate agents, let's face it, most real estate agents on a consistent basis avoid that toad as much as possible. In fact, most real estate agents avoid it altogether and wait for people to approach them. All right. So my question for you is, what are your tadpoles? What are those things that you're doing on a daily basis that, yeah, may need to be done, but they're not the most impactful things? Because Brian's message is organize your day around the things that are most impactful and start with the most impactful things. I would just ask you this. Do you really believe that it is most impactful to post something on social media versus picking up the phone and calling your sphere of influence or calling expired listings? I mean, honestly, which one do you think is more impactful? And I hope the answer that you're coming up with is, well, John, if I admit it, if I'm honest with myself, it's calling people, it's talking to people, it's reaching out to them proactively, not waiting passively the way posts on social media are structured. So my question for you is, are you prioritizing? What I would really encourage you to do is to take a look at your daily schedule, your daily process, and ask, am I really prioritizing in terms of the most impactful things? Toads first, frogs second, and tadpoles last. See, most people will fill up on tadpoles and say, well, I've had enough for today. I certainly couldn't do any more. I mean, I've spent hours doing all of this. I've had a really busy day. And yet they never even looked at a frog, let alone a toad, meaning prospect, calling expireds for sell by owners, their sphere of influence. Eat That Frog, guys and gals. Get the book, because what it will do, and especially right now, this time of the year, as you're working to create your plan and your schedule, read this book, because he'll take you through some exercises, some steps to really identify and put together a schedule that will be most impactful for you. Remember, it's not about time management. It's about event management. It's about creating a set of good habits consistently every single day to get the results that you want. And then person number 4, who's had a very significant impact on me in the last 12 years, and someone I actually was aware of before. I mean, I think that unless you've been living under a rock, this guy, I don't know how you couldn't know who he is. It's Zig Ziglar. Zig, in terms of his presentation style, is probably my favorite because he is just so animated and so excited constantly. But the thing that I remember most about Zig, and the thing that he's taught me, the number one principle that he's taught me, is to have a goal and have a plan. Zig's message typically is that most people are wandering generalities. They don't know specifically what they want. They just simply go through the motions of the day, just doing the things that they have to do to survive. And Zig's message was this: don't be that person. Don't be a wandering generality. Be a meaningful specific. Be the person who knows exactly what they want their life to be about. In other words, have a purpose. Get clear about what you want your relationships to look like, what you want your health to look like, what you want your finances to look like, your business. Get clear about those things. And then go about your days figuring that out, achieving those things, taking the steps necessary to create that life, a life by design. Don't be a wandering generality, be a meaningful specific. So my question for you is, are you really clear about what you want in 2021? Not just with business, but with your relationships. Which relationships do you want to improve or create? Which relationships do you need to terminate based upon the unhealthiness of those relationships? Or your health, your mental, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual health. What goals do you have there? Have you sat down to do that? To get clear in your mind about what it is that you want to achieve. Don't be a wandering generality, just simply going through the motions every day because that's what you did yesterday and the day before. And it's easier, it is, guys and gals, it's easier for all of us to just behave habitually. It's easy to do today what we did yesterday because that's simply what we know. And yet what we all know, if we recognize it, if we're honest with ourselves, is we have to stop doing that. We have to do what Zig basically said, is stop being a wandering generality, be meaningful, specific, take the time to have conversations with ourselves about what it is that we want. What's going to be the most important things for us as we look back on our lives at the end of our days? What are the things that we're going to either say, I'm glad I did that, or worse, say, I regret not doing that? So one of the things, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly because we don't have time, but one of the things that Zig shared with me and has taught me is this idea of the 7 steps to achieving a goal. I'm going to give you the 7 steps. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm just going to give them to you. And if you want to know more about it, then just look up Zig Ziglar and the 7 steps to achieving the goal. But number 1, what Zig says is identify your goal and write it down. Identify the goal and write it down. Number 2 is to identify a deadline for the goal and write that down. So I've got a goal and I'm going to achieve it by this date, whether it's a short-term, medium-term, or long-term goal. Then the 3rd step is to identify what the challenges are going to be. What's going to get in the way? What's going to get in the way of achieving that goal? And then the 4th step is to identify the solutions to those challenges. So if we identify the roadblocks, the challenges, the things that are going to get in the way, then we have to identify the solutions to those specific challenges. So as I'm sharing this with you, I just want you to think about your production goals in real estate, for example. What's your goal? What's the deadline date to achieve that? Maybe you're breaking it down on a quarterly basis, maybe a monthly basis, maybe it's just simply an annual basis. And then what are your challenges? What do you think is going to get in the way? Historically, for example, what have been your challenges? Let's set COVID aside and the fact that this was a crazy year. What has been your primary challenge in the past? And then looking forward, what do you anticipate your challenge or challenges will be? And then identify the solutions to those. You don't want to be that person who gets surprised by challenges because you simply didn't take the time to anticipate them. And then you have no plan. You don't know what to do. You're just reacting as opposed to responding with forethought. Then the 5th step is to actually write out a plan. And the most critical part, guys and gals, to a plan is to have a written daily schedule that identifies the baby steps, the minutia, those frogs and those toads that have to be done every day that accumulated over time lead to you living the life that you want. So creating a plan and having a written schedule. And then number 6, which I believe is the linchpin of this whole thing, is really identifying why you're going to do it. What's the reason that you're going to be willing to dramatically change your behavior in doing the things that the ordinary person's not willing to do in order to live the life that the ordinary person never will live? And then finally, step number 7 is to simply just do it. Take action. That's the 7-step process to achieving a goal. I promise you that if you go through that process and set your intentions on any particular goal, whether it's in your personal life, with your relationships, your health, or with your business, and follow that process, your chances of achieving your goal go up exponentially if you'll go through that process and stick to it. It is simply a formula. I firmly believe that success is just a process, guys and gals. It's all it is. See, most people have convinced themselves that success has a lot to do with luck and the innate abilities of people, where they've come from, their previous experiences, the people they know. I'm here to tell you that that is all just a bunch of excuses for people who don't want to admit what it takes because they don't want to do what it takes to be successful. The fact is, the success is nothing more than a process. It's a formula. Success has rules, and if you'll acknowledge them, recognize them, and play by the rules, in other words, follow the process, leverage the formula, you can be just as successful or more successful than the next person. I firmly, absolutely believe that. If a guy who grew up in Orangeville, Utah, in trailers, whose dad was an ex-con, right, whose both parents didn't graduate from high school but yet got GEDs, the guy who failed 9th grade English, who flunked out of law school, who was broke in 2009 and stands here before you today sharing this message, if I can do it, there's no question you can. Which leads me to the next person, who is Les Brown. You know, if you've never listened to Les Brown, he is a treat. He sounds like a preacher, although he is not. The thing that Les taught me is this. It's his phrase, you got to be hungry. In fact, when I hear him say it, it sounds something like this: you got to be hungry. His message is simply this, that you have to have a purpose. You have to have a why. You have to understand why it is that you're going to do what it is that you're doing. You know, he talks about his primary motivator when he was a young man, and it was his goal of buying his mom, Miss Mamie Brown, as he refers to her, a home. His mom adopted him. He and his brother were left in an abandoned building in a city in Florida when they were just after they were born. And they were discovered and eventually adopted by his mother, Miss Mamie Brown. And I don't remember how many she adopted, but it was somewhere north of 12. And he was so grateful for the fact that she adopted him. And he had this goal as a very young man, before he left the house, that he was going to someday buy his mom a home. And as a young man who began his journey of DJing and then eventually of speaking, he had this goal of buying his mom a home, which he eventually did. His message, guys and gals, and this is so important, and I want you to think about this. His message is really, it comes down to this: are you going to be driven by love, or are you going to be driven by fear? Most people, unfortunately, are driven by fear. Most people are affected on a daily basis by fear. The fear of, and fill in the blank, whatever it is. And therefore, they run away from the things that they have to do, should do, in order to live the life that they say that they want. I just want you to think about that. Think about the things that you know on a logical, conscious level, the things that you know that you should be doing or have to do in order to live the life that you want. Are you running away from those things because of fear? See, I firmly believe that in order to be an extraordinary person, we have to be people of passion. We have to be driven by our love for things, to be drawn to things, not chased by them. I just want you to think about this. If you were being chased by a bear in the woods, if you and I were in the woods together and being chased by a bear, what would you do? Now, don't tell me you'd push me down and outrun me, because I tried to do the same with you. But what would you do? And the answer is probably what you would do is you would run as fast as you can. If that bear was running at you full bore, you would run away from the bear. And my question is, where would you run to? And the answer would be anywhere you could get to where you could get away from the bear. It doesn't matter where you end up as long as you get away from the bear. In other words, as long as you get away from the thing that you're afraid of. See, I believe that the average person, that most people, that's what they do. They don't care where they end up as long as they can get away from their fears. So what are you afraid of? What are the things that if you were to sit down with yourself and acknowledge, What are the things on a daily basis in my relationships, with my health, or with my business that I'm afraid of, that I know that I should be doing, that I should be focused on, the conversations I should be having with the people in my life, or the prospects, potential prospects in my life, or the conversation with myself about how I need to improve my health, exercising, eating right, taking the time to work on my mental well-being. Have that conversation with yourself and identify what are the things that you're afraid of, that you're running from, that are preventing you from living the life that you want. See, people of passion are drawn. They have these things that they want, and they run towards those things passionately. People of passion live extraordinary lives. People of fear live substandard, ordinary lives that are never remembered, full of regret. I believe that the biggest repository of potential, ladies and gentlemen, is graveyards. Most people will take their potential to the grave. Don't let that happen. Remember Les Brown's message. You got to be hungry. Identify what it is that you want your life to be about, and be drawn by your love and your passion, not chased by your fear. Person number 6, we're almost done. Person number 6, drum roll please. It is Earl Nightingale. When I first heard Earl Nightingale, it was really kind of weird because he has a very deep voice, and I thought I was listening to a toad or a frog. But talk about a brilliant man. I mean, Earl Nightingale is probably the grandfather of the modern day inspirational, motivational speaker. He started back in the 50s and continued all the way through into the 1980s. And he has a huge library on personal development. I probably listen to him these days more than I do anybody else. And one of his best productions is Lead the Field. But the primary thing that I learned from Earl Nightingale is this: we become what we think about. In other words, what we focus on a daily basis leads to the actions that we take. This is what I learned from him. And this is really important. And I want you to write this down. Many of you have probably heard this, but it's like taking a bath. It's necessary every day because we get dirty. We forget, and our mind goes to the things that habitually we do or have always done. Our thoughts lead to our emotions, and our emotions lead to our actions, and our actions lead to our results. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about your current circumstances, the life that you're currently living, whether it's good, bad, or in between. I want you to recognize this, that your reality, your circumstances have everything to do with that equation. Your thoughts. The linchpin is your thoughts. That what you think about on a daily basis, you basically become. What you think about, you become. That's his message. And it is such a powerful message because for me, it's very freeing. It tells me that, look, okay, I'm in control. It's not those external forces. It's not all those things out there that people will say and claim is the reason or are the reasons for them not being successful or living the life that they're living. In other words, a life of a victim. See, Earl's message basically is don't be a victim, because you're not. You're not a victim unless you choose to be one. Be a victor. See, what victors do is they focus on the solutions. See, if you have a powerful thought, you experience very powerful emotions. And when you have powerful emotions, you tend to take very powerful actions. And when you take powerful actions, you live an amazing life. See, people who act with great intention towards the right things live amazing lives, extraordinary lives. So my question for you is this: are you mindful on a daily basis about what you're thinking? Your daily thoughts, your habitual thoughts. What you think about habitually creates the life that you live. So what are your habitual thoughts? What are your habitual emotions? Do you wake up most days feeling optimistic, powerful, confident? Or do you wake up most days feeling less than that? Feeling uncertain, feeling that you're not enough. See, all of that can be cleared up by simply changing what you focus on a daily basis. That was my primary message that I got from Mr. Earl Nightingale. And then who's number 7? Who did I leave for last? Well, I would be remiss and I wouldn't be honest with myself if I didn't give my best friend credit. So it's George. And I didn't expect to get emotional about it, but I guess I'm going to for just a second here. We're going to move on. But it's George. And I'll just share this story with you very quickly. George was the one who really introduced me to all of those people, whether directly or indirectly, because he was the one who introduced me to Mr. Jim Rohn. And that domino fell to the next and to the next and to the next. George was really the person who started the process for me of my own personal development journey. But the thing, George has taught me many things, but the thing that George taught me in the very beginning of this crazy journey of mine was this. You know, when I was working to find my voice as a presenter, he said to me, he said, you have to share your story. And I said to him, I said, what do you mean share my story? I said, look, George, I grew up in Orangeville, Utah. Nobody knows where that is. I grew up in trailers. I grew up relatively poor, right? I flunked out of 11th or 9th grade English. I flunked out of law school. I lost everything, because this was a conversation we had in 2009. I said, I've lost everything. And here I am starting a new company. I said, that's my story. And he just looked at me and laughed. He said, well, it is and it isn't. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. But this was his point, that you got to know your story, guys and gals. You got to really understand who you are and what is amazing about you. And that, yes, even if you failed 9th grade English and flunked out of law school and you lost everything, you're broke, that doesn't define you. That is not who you are. That is just simply part of your story. So my question for you is this, you know, what story do you tell yourself about yourself? You know, I believe that we need to be honest with ourselves about the way things are. And what I mean by that is not sugarcoating things. That's not what I mean. Because I think that when we look at ourselves, we have a tendency to not sugarcoat, but what we have a tendency to do is beat ourselves up, to be very critical of ourselves. My message to you and my hope for you is that as you think about this concept of know your story, is to really recognize who you are, where you came from, the challenges that you have faced, and how those challenges prepared you. And that you are no different than anybody else, that whatever it is that you say that you want, that you can have that. That the life that you say that you want to live, you can live that life. One of the things that we will consistently do, and I say this we because I find myself doing this as well. And I really work hard not to do this. I try to be as conscious of it as possible. But what we will do is we will have a tendency to look at other people and say, well, they've got it all figured out. I could never do what they do. Right? For all sorts of reasons. Well, maybe they were born on the better side of the tracks, or they were born in a different era, or they had the opportunity to be born into a family that had money, or whatever the story is that we tell ourselves about other people and why they are successful and we are not. I would just caution you and encourage you to be very mindful of the story that you create in your mind about yourself. I believe that the most crucial conversation that we can have with anybody is the conversation we have with ourselves. Because it comes back to that idea of what we focus on and ultimately what thoughts we allow to be controlling in our mind, and therefore the emotions that we feel on a daily basis, and the actions we take, and the reality that we live. So guys and gals, hopefully this has been helpful for you. Now, as you think about the 7 people that I talked about and their primary message, I would ask you to do this. Which of those is the one that primarily you need to focus on? You know, Jim Rohn's idea of stop wishing that things were easier, but whether you were better. In other words, really go on a journey of personal development, get committed to it. Or with John C. Maxwell, of this idea that you're a leader and that really a leader's number one skill is communication. Is your should your number one focus be working on becoming a better communicator? Or with Brian Tracy, is it more about prioritization? The number one thing you need to work on is really having a schedule that identifies the most impactful, the highest impact things that you could and should be doing in order to live the life that you want. Or is it, Zig Ziglar's message about just having a greater clarity about what it is that you want, the life that you want to live, and what you're going to have to do on a daily basis to live that? Or is it Les Brown's message about you have to be hungry? You got to know why it is that you're going to pay the price, this difficult price, to live this life that you want. In other words, what's your purpose? What's your passion? What's the love that's going to draw you to the future, paying that price, going down that difficult pathway that most people aren't willing to? Or is it found in Earl Nightingale's message about mindset, about being very mindful of what you focus on every day, constantly throughout the course of the day? Or is it the conversation you have with yourself and really understanding your story and being kinder to yourself, because you are an amazing individual? You are. Every one of you is an amazing individual. So thank you for your time this morning. Hopefully this has been very helpful for you. I've enjoyed the conversation because, look, I share this with you very passionately and very genuinely, because these people and their messages have in large part created the leader that I am. And I am so grateful for each and every one of them and their messages. So let's finish it up with some closing affirmations.